Stephen Yates, Senior Fellow at America First Policy Institute and Chair of the China Policy Initiative. Always good to see you from his Lego bunker. I just got to get your reaction to this soundbite, and then I'm switching gears entirely to another part of the world. But he has the only person who has more trouble speaking than Joe Biden is Kamala Harris. So, it's a twofer here that we have in the White House. But I just wanted to get your reaction to that soundbite.
Well, it's a little bit astonishing that after, seemingly 2 lifetimes in the United States Senate and then also 8 years as vice president, he sort of forgot that Russia and China both have a veto on the Security Council and pretty much can block anything that goes through that body that will hit one or the other of them. And while Joe was sort of on the sidelines as Russia revved up the war engines for this invasion, Putin and Xi Jinping were having a little confab during the Olympics, and Joe's team went and asked China for some help, and China said, thank you very much, but no thanks. And so I don't think this war criminal stuff is really meant to do anything serious, other than I think the Biden comms team has found that this is the only issue that he can demagogue on that a lot of Americans would agree on, in the sense that almost no Americans think Putin is any good, and he certainly isn't. But war crimes at a court somewhere sounds like a fabulous idea that will bog down a future president. Thanks, Joe.
Oh, yeah, that's a great point. That's not him. A future president, that's not him. Again, 2024. Talking with our friend Stephen Yates. I want to switch gears because I was reading the story this morning about elections in Hong Kong. And I remember when it first came to be that Carrie Lam, she's Hong Kong's chief executive. There's not going to be any more independent administration of Hong Kong now with China's annexation. I don't even want to call it. They just took it over. And so I know that the CCP is heavily involved in this. Now she's stepping down. Her 5-year term ends in June. She says that she wants to spend more time with her family. Maybe it's I can't imagine having to work with the CCP at the level that she does, especially at this particular time. It's expected that her chief secretary John Lee is going to succeed her. I wanted to talk a little bit about this because this is just a theater. This is all theater. Why are they still pretending that there's any kind of independent administration of Hong Kong separate from that of the CCP? Tell us about this.
Yeah, well, Dana, I think this is actually an incredibly important story, and it might not seem unnatural to people who are tracking headlines because it is a foregone conclusion that the steamroller has already gone over the exercise of free elections in Hong Kong. There's a lot of truth to that. But the Hong Kong people haven't quit. But you know who doesn't get to spend more time with their family? My friend Jimmy Lai, who created the freest media outlet in the Chinese language world. And he's in prison because he stood by the students at Tiananmen Square in 1989. He stood by the people standing up for their rights in Hong Kong, even as the odds were against everyone else. And he had plenty of money. He could have gone anywhere. But he basically said he owes everything in this life to freedom and therefore must commit his life to freedom of others. That's what's going on, and most of the world doesn't know. It's really important that we keep his name, Jimmy Lai, out there and this cause, because Carrie Lam possibly has done the worst job of anyone in the history of elected office in destroying the actual entity and people you were supposed to represent. Now, we might feel like Joe Biden's doing a good job of competing with her on that, but we still hold on to a lot of institutions now, if we will fight and support them, that Hong Kong has lost in breathtaking speed in recent years. So this is a sobriety checkpoint about the realities of China, but also how the Communist Party can really steamroll and infiltrate and undermine free institutions if we aren't vigilant.
Yeah, her legacy is going to be awful. I mean, she basically oversaw the destruction of the democracy in Hong Kong.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Complete enablement. It was also a violation of a treaty that the British government made with the Chinese government, where the Hong Kong people were supposed to rule Hong Kong with a high degree of autonomy for 50 years from 1997. And my math isn't perfect. I wasn't educated under Common Core, but I did go to public schools. But I don't think we're at 50 yet.
No, we're not. That's a great point. I mean, that was part of the agreement that, and Britain would, after that point, Britain would turn return Hong Kong, I guess, over to China's administrative oversight, and they would have the one country, two systems, which they clearly don't have one country, two systems. Not
Nope,
anymore.
nope. It's gone to one country, one system. The idea was that you bet on that length of time and freedom and the world will help China evolve and we sort of grow out of our problems. That's sort of the liberal globalist view about all problems. We can do nothing and they'll just sort of solve themselves with this magical fairy dust known as time. It turns out that authoritarians and bad people work against that if good people won't step up and push history the other way.
We're talking with our good friend Stephen Yates, foreign policy expert. He advised in the previous Bush administration as well. One of the things when I was watching all of this unfold and watching the fight over, how this is the one country, two systems, because it really benefits China to have two distinct systems because Hong Kong's economy was so healthy and obviously so much more open than China's at large is. Surely there has to be some kind of common sense driven by at least, self-interest in somewhere in Beijing that it benefits them to maintain that somehow. But I don't really see that happening because they've gone after so many media companies, they've gone after so many other corporations there. It's like they're hell bent on their own destruction.
Well, I think that there are a lot of Chinese people that are rational and would see this as something that is very hostile to their interests, but they don't live in a free information environment. They don't live with the freedom to actually criticize or raise inconvenient truths to their leadership. And it's actually quite telling that under Xi Jinping, the Communist Party doesn't have the confidence to let Hong Kong be Hong Kong or let Taiwan be Taiwan, that they have to clamp down so harshly that that basically suggests that they don't have confidence in the durability of their own system. They can't afford for the rest of the Chinese people to see that, look, the Hong Kong people can live with freedom. They're still country-loving Chinese people, and there's no problem here because the Communist Party, if they allow that to happen in the rest of China, it's bye-bye Communist Party.
And they looking at the CCP's perspective, it always struck me as they sort of they felt that they had to, and I'm not defending this at all, obviously, I think it's evil, but it sort of felt like they had to clamp down on Hong Kong as much as they did because of Taiwan, because Taiwan exists.
Well, there is the fact that Taiwan has lived free. They are a much more significant economy in the world per capita than China is. I mean, people forget it's 23 million people versus 1.3 billion. And those 23 million people are one of the most important trading nations in the world and among the top trade partners of the United States. And so it's a profound example that just dramatically undermines the lie that the Communist Party has been selling. Hong Kong did that too. But really, I think that something has snapped inside of China, and Xi Jinping might have been the one that snapped it, but he's really gone to the mat in rolling things back toward more of a cultural revolution kind of control inside China. And of course, that's what they're doing outside of China, which is why we have to be smart about it here too.
Yeah. Last question for you, talking with our friend Stephen Yates. So everybody's focused on Ukraine, and not that that's a smaller story. I just happen to think China is a worse enemy, because I think China has more resources than Russia does. And if anybody has questions on that, just look at how poorly, that's why I was really hitting the story of how poorly maintained Russia's military equipment was, how the morale of their soldiers. I mean, the measure of that country's strength is seen on the battlefield with the morale of their soldiers and how well equipped their tanks are. I mean, they're
Right.
it's just crazy. But Indo-Pacific, these man-made islands that they have. Apparently, one of them is called Mischief Reef, which I think is hysterical. I mean, this sounds like
stole from the Philippines.
Yeah, it's like this is some Dr. Evil stuff. So you have Subi Reef, Fiery Cross Reef, Johnson Reef, Mischief Reef, and apparently, for just to kind of deduce it down into layman's terms, they've been getting a little froggy over there with some of these islands. They have the stuff that they stole from Philippines. They have their man-made islands. They've really increased their military exercises, as I understand it, involving these islands. And NATO leaders, not just NATO, but also the other alliances that we have in Indo-Pacific, are kind of looking at this eyebrows raised kind of looking at Ukraine, then looking back over here. This is concerning.
It is concerning, and I trust that the American people, when presented with truth and real information, are capable of making the judgment that Vladimir Putin is evil and terrible, and he needs to be met in terms of a challenge, but that Europe has the money and the material to be able to do a lot of that, and the United States of America has bigger interests in the world, and we don't have the luxury of dealing with every interest in every part of the world, especially simultaneously. When you look at the amount of the global economy that's dependent on those waterways that are the South China Sea, people don't know what the South China Sea is, but they sure know that they want to order something online and they want to go to a mega store to be able to pick it up, and that comes on a container ship through those waterways. And so we can't afford to have freedom of navigation there clamped down on. Of course, it's all good because Xi Jinping promised Barack Obama this is all peaceful and they're not going to be militarized. And of course, because they made that promise, there are no landing strips and there are no military sea vessels at those islands because the Chinese leader promised. So it's all good.
I sometimes wonder if Yates didn't write like Team America. I sometimes wonder. And one last quick point on that too. If people think the supply chain, because it's not just, from products from China, you're talking about anything coming in from Philippines or Indonesia or Vietnam or, anywhere else. Oh my gosh, the supply chain disaster if that sea actually became contested the way that China's kind of wanting it to be. What a mess. Stephen Yates, we're out of time, but we always appreciate your insight. Thank you so much, my friend. Go follow him at YatesComms on Twitter. Stephen, thanks so much. Have a great week.
Thank you, Dana. Take care.